Well, you're probably asking yourselves long about now, what do bungee jumping grandmothers and diaper changing dads have to do with the discussion today? And the answer is just about everything, because we've been talking about change. And to bring about real change for true equality, we really need to break free of stereotypes. Men and women need to break free of those stereotypes. After all, women can run companies, and men can nurture children. And that progress won't happen until we get more women into positions of leadership where change can be effectuated. And that means across governments, in institutions, in companies. And unfortunately, as we all know too well, the representation of women at those high levels of decision making is still not commensurate with women's talents and capabilities. And so I'm delighted this afternoon to be here with a woman who has indeed reached the uppermost levels of corporate America. Carolyn Tastad is the Group President of North America, Procter Gamble. And she is the driving force behind that video, which you just saw, which is just a part of Procter & Gamble's We See Equal campaign. And I'm proud that Seneca Women is partnering with Procter & Gamble to be engaged in an initiative to dispel the myths, those myths not based on fact, but nevertheless powerful myths that hold women back. So Carolyn, welcome.
Thank
Delightful
you.
to be here with you.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
Let me ask you about the installation, which if you haven't paused to really participate in it and understand these myths and then the facts that really are what should be part of the narrative and aren't to the degree that they should be. This installation, what is it about? What are we trying to do here?
Yeah. Well, when we started this work, and we did this work with Seneca Women, we were very focused on those things that were holding women back from their full participation at the top levels of companies, of institutions, of government. And we wanted to find a way to unlock inspiration, motivation. We wanted to provoke a little bit. And so we designed this installation to be very interactive. I really hope you have the chance to participate in it and see it this afternoon. And what we did is we took on 5 myths that we thought were very prevalent in today's conversation. And we took those myths and we had people sit in the myths for a while. That's what happens at the very beginning of the installation. You sit in the myths and it feels very familiar for everybody who's been part of that conversation. It feels familiar, it feels onerous, it feels a little bit depressing sometimes. And so with just a flip of the switch, we turn to the reality. And this is really documented facts, true reality that says this is the truth. This is the reality out there. And we deliberately contrast the reality versus the myths to have people experience that contrast, again, to provoke, hopefully to inspire, to enlighten, and ideally to motivate change.
And we're really talking about new myths, are we not? Women have always been stereotyped in ways shouldn't work outside the home, shouldn't aspire to success. But these myths today that you will find as you visit the installation, they're deeply ingrained, they're commonplace narratives, and they're deeply problematic.
Yeah, and they're very, as we did this, we took a look at the common narratives that are very current in the last, call it 12 to 24 months. So this is all very current information. And we looked at, we took 5 myths that we think are getting in the way. Obviously, the first is really that women are not qualified to get to the top of house, to get to the C-suite. They lack certain characteristics or qualities, and that's what's holding them back. We also tackled the notion that because of that, there's an insufficient pipeline. There just aren't enough women. Of course, we would like to have them in the C-suite. There are just not enough of them, and I can't find them. The third one is we heard a little bit about STEM today and about technology. And the third myth that we tackle is that, STEM and technology, that's a guy thing. It's a guy thing. And so, again, we would have more women, but they're not as capable of that. The fourth myth is, again, we'd have more women up in the C-suite level, but it's very difficult for them to juggle their home and family and commitments, and that's part of the reason that there's a gap. And then the fifth, which is timely right now, especially having heard from some of the panels just before lunch, with the Me Too movement, Time's Up, just the whole notion of sexual harassment, and for some, the belief that it's perhaps being overstated or exaggerated. All of these things we know are myths.
Now, we can't possibly get through all 5 myths today, but let's talk about the biggest one, because I think in some ways it might explain why women are still stuck at that 17-20% range of not being able to go beyond.
Sure. The one that we like to talk about as really being kind of foundational for so many of them is the one that we call the fix the women myth. And it really, the premise is that, again, women would get further along to the C-suite, to the top of organizations, except for the fact that they are just lacking certain characteristics. They lack confidence. They lack ambition. They lack the ability to take risks. And this lacking fill in the blanks. And as a result of that, if we could just fix the women, right? If they would do more, be more, change, we could make more progress. Now, the reality is women make wonderful leaders. Women have great qualities and capabilities to get to the top of house. But based on longstanding norms and traditions, based on patterns or bias in terms of how we position men versus women, men and women, we see differences in the behavior. It was fun to hear Stacy talk this morning. This whole notion that we just perceive certain behaviors differently. And in many cases, we judge those behaviors based on a norm that is rooted in male behavior. It's natural for us to do that, but we define that as the definition of normal. And when something doesn't look like that or show up like that, we label it or we judge it, often deferentially.
So that's the standard. Now give us an example of how this works in reality.
Yeah, let's take confidence. Okay, confidence is a very common narrative, and the whole notion of women lacking confidence. So, studies have shown time and time again, and I mean this with all respect to the men in the audience, that men tend to overestimate capabilities in many things, from math to entrepreneurship. So if a man will apply to a job with some of the qualifications, a woman will apply to the job if she has all of the qualifications. Now, when a woman says she's not qualified, and when a man says he is qualified, the problem is we believe both of those individuals. And as a result of that, we have come to create this narrative which says women are challenged with confidence. There are lectures given on it. There are books written about it. There are articles all over the place on it. Now, let's put that aside for a minute. There was a great study that Hewlett-Packard did where there was a job, I'm going to shortcut it, 5 qualifications. Typically, men had 2 or 3 of the qualifications. They applied for the job. Women had 4 of the qualifications. They did not apply. Okay, so that created, wow, men applied. They went for it. The women didn't apply. That's a confidence gap. Again, let's put that aside for a minute. If this is the confidence gap, I'm really interested to understand what this is, the other side of the coin. So what I haven't created is any narrative called overconfidence, called overestimation, called whatever you want to call it. I haven't seen that book. That book didn't get written. But there's a lot of books over here, and so I think it reinforces what Stacy was talking about, which is just this notion that we define normal. We define normal as what we typically see, and when a behavior shows up or characteristics show up different from normal, then we label that, we judge that, and that's part of what we've been doing. Now, as leaders, we have the opportunity to influence that. We have the opportunity to look underneath that and broaden the definition of leadership, so that we can truly get the the great talent and capability that makes all of us better. Because certainly you take the Hewlett-Packard case and those case studies, and we lost the opportunity to advance the best talent. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is how do we think about broadening that definition of leadership? Because women are great leaders. They are every bit as confident and ambitious as men. They're every bit as qualified. We don't really need to fix them because they're not broken.
Amen to that, but I could tell from the reaction of recognition from the audience that this is a familiar narrative. Mm-hmm. Another one is the pipeline. Yeah. So we all know that leadership teams are predominantly male, and the reaction often is, well, we just can't find qualified mm-hmm. women. Mm-hmm. What's the real story?
Well, I believe, a number of us believe, there are more than enough qualified women who really want big jobs. I really believe that they are out there. And we believe the answer to this whole notion of the pipeline myth, that we call it, is simple math. We call it simple math. So let me give you a couple of examples. In the Fortune 500 today, out of the 500 companies in the Fortune 500, there are 23 women in the CEO spot. 23 women. So that's 4.6%. Now, if we were going to get to equal, I've got to get from 4.6% to 50%. That's like a tenfold increase. That's daunting, right? That sounds just far too difficult. If I take it another way, and if I just do the math and I say 500, I want to get to half, I got to get to 250 minus 23, I got 227 women that I need to find. Now I've got 500 companies, many of them global, with hundreds of thousands of employees. I just need to find 223 women who want that job. I think that's doable. Take a look at boards, right? You have boards, averagely 12 people on a board. People have 25% women on a board. You want to get to 50? 3 more. 3 more women. And you get to a 50-50 board. And if you don't know where to find the other 3 women, give me a call because I will give you names. I promise. So again, simple math. Simple math makes something more manageable. And again, as leaders, we have to be intentional. We have to be committed. And when we are, I think we can make great progress.
So in this case, not just high-level STEM is necessary. It's just simple math.
Yes.
So we're closely running out of time here. And I just wanted to ask, what have we learned from exposing these myths? And perhaps most importantly, what can each of us do?
It's a great question. I think the biggest thing that we have to do is stop letting these myths perpetuate the narrative. We really do need to create new narratives. We have to create narratives based on the reality and based on the world that we want to live in. So we have to seek to understand the differences in men and women, not label them. We have to be intentional about selecting and advancing talent so that every person can fulfill their greatest dreams and so that they can live up to their fullest potential in all of the companies and institutions and governments that we have around us. And we just have to stop making excuses or letting myths get in the way.
So let me just tell you about one way we're hoping to make a difference on this score. As part of our commitment to the Bloomberg Equality Summit, Seneca Women is launching a new tool, an app that we hope can drive solutions toward the critical problem of we are talking about today. As you may notice, our organization is called Seneca. It's evocative and inspired by the first women's rights convention that took place here in New York in 1848, and we are still on that journey to equality. Today, we, at this moment, know that all of us can find ways to impact the outcome that we're seeking, and we don't have to wait another 100 years to do so. We look to the companies because companies are the real leaders with tremendous impact to make a difference in this space. It's why we wrote the book Fast Forward, which each of you will get a copy of, a roadmap for companies, and why we created this app to foster inclusive leadership. We spent time working with Apple on building a customizable tool, And we would love to work with each of you who want to help drive this progress forward. It is a new kind of tool, an employee engagement tool that will fast forward men and women at work. It connects employees with power, purpose, and connection every single day. It's designed to foster diversity and inclusion, leadership development, a positive work environment, and employee engagement. And it involves men as well as women, because the answer to the future is men and women working together. And that's what today is all about.